Sometimes being a multi-billionaire makes you public enemy number one. That was certainly the case for Tsar Nicholas II. He had an inflation-adjusted net worth of $300 billion, but his massive fortune and excessive spending led to his downfall. This is how Russia's last Tsar inherited an empire and lost everything. The Russian Empire was a political and economic powerhouse long before Tsar Nicholas II was even born. Powerful leaders like Catherine the Great expanded the empire throughout conquest, colonization, and diplomacy. The House of Romanov was one of the most successful dynasties in history. Centuries of Tsarist rule made Nicholas II extremely rich, but it was also the cause of his downfall. Tsar Nicholas II was receiving a hefty annual allowance even before he became leader of the Russian Empire. When he turned 16, he became heir apparent to the Russian throne and started receiving 100,000 rubles per year. The Tsar began spending frivolously almost immediately after gaining power in 1894. Following the death of his father, Tsar Alexander III, Nicholas II was granted a pay raise. His annual income doubled to 200,000 rubles. To put that into perspective, factory workers in Russia were earning just 500 rubles a year. His coronation was one of the most lavish and expensive ceremonies in history. 85,000 soldiers attended the event, and 24 tons of silver and gold tableware were hauled to Moscow. Tsar Nicholas and his family ate only the finest food. Even the leftovers from the Tsar's table were later served as delicacies in restaurants. Tsar Nicholas's wealth was mostly tied to real estate controlled by the crown. He inherited 65 million hectares of land in Altai and Transbaikal. As an added bonus, the regions were filled with mines that produced gold, silver, and copper. The mining operations earned Tsar Nicholas II 6 to 7 million rubles every year. Tsar Nicholas also controlled valuable real estate assets like the Royal Hermitage Museum and regalia like the diamond-clad Great Imperial Crown. He would go on week-long hunts and spend 30,000 rubles a year tracking down big game. Tsar Nicholas's wife, Empress Alexandria Fyodorovna, also made big purchases. She spent 40,000 rubles on clothes and jewelry every year. In 1899, the couple visited relatives in Europe. Nicholas spent 150,000 on posh clothes just for the occasion. In the second decade of his reign, Tsar Nicholas continued to spend ridiculous amounts of money. He was spending so much that his private cash funds were beginning to run low. He regularly had to ask for more money from his Imperial Majesty's own chancellery because he kept going over budget. The Tsar was given 20,000 rubles a year for basic expenses. This room money was never enough for Tsar Nicholas II. As the Tsar continued to spend excessively, his public support decreased dramatically. His adherence to autocratic rule didn't sit well with the working class, and his wildly unpopular political maneuvers only made matters worse. The Russo-Japanese War from 1904 to 1905 resulted in the Russian Empire losing significant territory. Russian citizens lost even more faith in the Tsar following Bloody Sunday on January 23, 1905. Bloody Sunday was the beginning of the First Russian Revolution. Hunger strikes and riots followed, which forced the Tsar's hand. He eventually began a process of constitutional reform. However, Tsar Nicholas gave up only a small portion of his autocratic powers. His popularity took another major hit in 1906 when Rasputin began acting as a healer for Nicholas's son Alexei Rasputin, who claimed he could cure Alexei's hemophilia, and many historians believe the mystic's scandalous reputation helped discredit the Tsarist government even further. The Tsar's excessive spending and poor political decisions soon reached a tipping point. He spent the entirety of his 20,000 ruble room money stipend on military uniforms in 1910. The uniforms didn't serve a practical purpose. He just wanted to show off to his relatives and friends in Germany. During this time, the Tsar spent significant amounts of money on his hobbies, but the biggest expense came during the 300th anniversary celebration of the Romanov dynasty. The Tsar commissioned 1.5 million gold, silver, and bronze commemorative medals for the celebration. But little did Nicholas II know that the party would be one of his last. That year, the ministry ended up spending over 17 million rubles. The spending sprees continued into the following year when Empress Alexandria spent 25,000 rubles on jewelry and photography sessions for the family. August 1914 marked the beginning of the end for Tsar Nicholas II. He gave the order for Russia to join World War I, a decision that proved to be disastrous for Russian citizens. More than 15 million men joined the army, which resulted in massive worker shortages. With few people left to grow crops and work in the factories, food became more and more scarce. Inflation resulted in massive food price spikes, and soon famine famine consumed many Russian cities. This turmoil was largely ignored by the Tsar, and he only acted when riots broke out. The Great War also affected the Tsar's finances. He was forced to close his accounts in England and bring the money back to Russia. The imperial family kept between 7 and 14 million rubles in foreign banks, including some money in German banks. That small fortune now was off limits because of the war. By 1917, Tsar Nicholas II had burned through half of his personal savings. He had about 1 million rubles left, which was far less than the 2 million he had in 1896. On March 12, 1917, the Tsarist autocracy was overthrown. A few days later, Tsar Nicholas was forced to abdicate the throne. He no longer had access to the empire's vast fortune. In April 1918, a brand new Bolshevik government moved Nicholas and the imperial family to Yekaterinburg. It was a far cry from the life of luxury he had become accustomed to. He and his family basically lived in squalor. The shack was dusty and the linens were dirty. Fear gripped the family. On July 17, 1918, Tsar Nicholas and his family were executed by Bolsheviks under the order of Lenin, who thought the last vestiges of the Romanov dynasty made it impossible for the working class to rise. That's it, folks. Thanks for watching.